R-O dub, R-O dub, R-O dub, R-O dub, R-O dub, R-O dub, R-O dub.
It's
Hey!
ROW, Raised on Wrestling. My name is Ruman True the Luchador, and I have my guest all the way from Colorado is Joey Terry. How are you, Joey?
Hey, just another day in the neighborhood, my man. How are you doing?
Oh, fantastic. Looking forward to interviewing you tonight and how you were raised on wrestling and all that good stuff. So just jump right in. How were you raised on wrestling?
Oh wow. Well, these waters run deep, right? So really, to tell you that story, I have to tell you a story about my family. So my family has been wrestling fans for as long as I can ever remember, even before I was around. There's a really great story about my dad's mom. So my grandmother was at a wrestling event back in the late 60s, early 70s. Florida had a ton of different promotions back in those times. And, by the way, yeah, I'm in Colorado, but hometown is Tampa, Florida. So growing up there, and, my family has a lot of roots there. So my grandmother was actually at a wrestling show. And I don't know which wrestler it was, but whoever was the major heel at the time, she was doing everything she could to talk all kinds of noise. I mean, as any fan would hate that heel wrestler. Um, and it was funny too because my grandfather, who's a pretty big man, he's about 6'4", he was about 250, 260 at the time. He had to physically come between this wrestler and my grandmother. She was about to jump over the barricade and give him what for, for beating up the good guy. So, and from there, I remember growing up as a kid, and it's really kind of full circle too, because Netflix, I believe it was Netflix, had that series regarding Glow. And I remember being a kid and watching Glow, and they had the Fabergé Organics shampoo commercials during Glow, and it was also really bizarre because that was the only shampoo my grandmother would use, was the Fabergé Organics. But yeah, my dad was a super wrestling fan as well. Um, one thing that you could count on was wrestling would be on if it was being broadcast. It would always be on the television. It didn't matter what day of the week. It didn't matter what time of day it came on. Um, so yeah, it's been a kind of just from day one till now. I mean, just wrestling has always been there. My family's always had some different ties with wrestling. We definitely went to shows. We saw wrestlers, and that was one of the cool things about being in Tampa. Tampa is kind of known for three things, really, at least from my point of view. They make cigars. It's the death metal capital of the world, and there are a ton of wrestlers that live in Tampa, that operate out of Tampa. There's a lot of different schools in Tampa. So wrestling, it was almost surreal to walk into the local grocery store, and all of a sudden you see this giant guy, 6'5", 6'6", just jacked to the gills. Back in those days, everybody was jacked up and shredded, and to see these larger than life people in kind of a more natural element. I mean, somebody's shopping for cereal or whatever. So there's been times where, being in the grocery store, and maybe some old Florida fans will recognize seeing Mark Starr in the grocery store. That was really cool. Anytime there was a car show at the Florida State Fairgrounds, which is also in Tampa, they would usually have some kind of wrestler there, management or a handful of wrestlers. So, I have a lot of memories of being just around town and just seeing all of these different characters, all these different personas. And, we didn't have a chance to talk about it, but my Aunt Roberta actually went to school with Terry Boucher, aka Hulk Hogan. So, not to say that they were super good friends or anything like that, but Tampa has a very rich history of wrestlers, and just growing up in that part of town, that area of Florida, it almost comes with the territory. Like, you almost have to be a wrestling fan if you live in Tampa. So shout out to all my people in Tampa. But yeah, it's been kind of a wild time. I mean, especially, I'm almost 40 this year. I'll be 40 this year. So growing up in the early 80s, and remembering some of these matches, some of these kind of, larger than life type matches. And it was funny too, because back in the day when you had satellite, you could basically get any channel that you wanted, satellite wise. You just had to put in the coordinates, and then the satellite, and then all of a sudden you're watching whatever. I'll never forget being at my Uncle Emmett's house with my dad and watching the scaffold match between the Road Warriors and the Midnight Express. That was just, being a kid. I think I was like 5 or 6 years old at the time. Tremendous, just insane. Nothing I had ever witnessed before. And, I was always a Road Warrior fan too growing up. My dad was super into the Road Warriors. And it was that first kind of, as soon as he saw him come out to Iron Man, right? And that goes back to the Tampa metal scene too. As soon as Hawk and Animal came out to Iron Man, like, that was it. I'll always remember that music hitting and those guys coming out, and just, I mean, there was nobody that could touch them. I mean, and it wasn't until they started facing the Koloffs that people actually started getting behind them. And but my dad was always a fan, and my dad, rest in peace, he was always into kind of more of those darker wrestling characters. He was a super big Kevin Sullivan fan, and all the stuff that he was doing back in the day, with the face paint and the devil worshiping, and all of this type of stuff. So it's just, it's something that I grew up with. It was always around. It was always on TV. We'd always go over to my uncle's house to watch the pay-per-views. So wrestling is definitely been kind of something that really hooked me early on. And of course, being a little kid, and regardless of what's going on now, but being a little kid, you see this character, Hulk Hogan, talking about eating vitamins and saying your prayers, and flexing off and showed his big old guns and stuff. And it's just, so being a little kid, Hulk Hogan was definitely somebody that I had attached to. And then, of course, all the merchandise that they sold for Hulk Hogan and stuff. But as I developed and became more of an actual fan, than growing out from being just a little kid, there were other wrestlers that I really, really enjoyed and admired. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was definitely one of my guys, especially after he left NWA, WCW stuff, and he started doing the WWE with his costume, and he blowing fire. It was a spectacle in and of itself. So always loved Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Always love, of course, the Road Warriors were always one of my favorites. And then, fast forwarding through a little bit, wrestlers like Bret Hart, especially after he left the Hart Foundation and did his solo stuff. And, don't want to get too far into it, but, jumping into like the Screw Job and, his match with Shawn and, you know, all that feud. But yeah, Bret Hart's definitely one of them. Man, there's just so many old wrestlers that I super enjoyed watching as a kid. You know, Dusty Rhodes was super big back in Florida. You know, and that was before his polka dot thing. You know, I mean, when first saw him come out with the polka dots, I was just like, oh boy, what are they doing to my guy here? But you know, Dusty, and then years later, Dustin. I remember when he first started showing up on WCW back in the days, and you know, looking at other wrestlers throughout the years, Sting was definitely one of my big guys. You know, and that was before, you know, he came out as the Crow Sting. You know, he was still the beach guy with the flat top and blonde hair, and you know, he's always had the face paint, which is kind of like his trademark. And then, you know, even through the 90s, you're talking about dudes like you know, I remember when Lex Luger first got signed to WWF at the time. You know, the slam heard round the world, you know, maybe only second to Hogan slamming Andre, I guess, even though Andre had been slammed a few times before that. But you know, him picking up Yokozuna and slamming him on the USS Intrepid, that was just such a memory for me. And the Lex Express and driving all around, and you know, dudes like the Steiner brothers back in WCW days with their, you know, wild looking wrestling singlets, you know, always had the neon colors. And my dad was a super fan of Rick, right? You know, the dog faced gremlin. So yeah, wrestling has just always been there for me, and it's always something that I've enjoyed. There's many more wrestlers that for some reason I'm just not thinking about right this minute, but there's a lot of dudes from back in the day that you just wanted to root for, you know, and being a little kid at that time, I mean, you didn't really understand the dynamic of heel versus face, but what you did understand was, hey, these are the good guys and these are the bad guys, and you want the good guys to win, you know. So teams like the Rock and Roll Express were always super cool. And then there was a time where it kind of felt like there was a lot of dudes who used the Express moniker, right? There was the Tokyo Express with Mr. Fuji as manager, Midnight Express with Jim Cornette as manager. You got the Rock and Roll Express. I think there were a couple other expresses that I might not be remembering right this minute, but yeah, it was definitely a time to be a wrestling fan, especially growing up in the 80s, and just kind of having those different promotions too. You know, I mean, we're starting to get back to that now after many years of WWE kind of being like really the only one that you heard about. And we're starting to get back to that place where there's more than one wrestling company to watch. Yeah. So maybe a little later on, we'll talk about kind of what reignited my love for wrestling, because I'll be real. The Attitude Era I liked up until the point where a lot of the matches started becoming more objectifying to women, right? I mean, I didn't get any real joy watching a bra and panties match. Sorry. You know, I know there are people out there that love those matches, and you know, it did create some stars. You know, let's be honest, there was some stars that were created because of those matches. But for me, as a wrestling fan, kind of when they started going down that road, it was just like, I'm gonna take a little bit of a break from wrestling, and I did. And especially when WCW kind of fully went away, you know, they got bought, and then they had the sort of weird invasion try to duplicate the success that WCW had back in the mid 90s with, you know, Hall and Nash coming over and really running roughshod. And anyway, what people may not know is that once you get me talking on a subject, I can just go. So I don't know if we have any sort of format we want to follow, but I'll shut up for a minute so you can ask some questions.
Oh, you're fine. Like the more meat on the bones, the better. Like for real. I when you mentioned like the Road Warriors, I remember like there's their opening of like oh Rudder Wet Rush, and then like the whole crowd would go nuts, and like how they were on the cover of the old WCW video game. And do you have any favorite wrestling video games that you can think of?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it all goes back to the first time, and some old school Nintendo fanatics may remember. Nintendo had a game, and I think Tecmo put it out, but it was just called Pro Wrestling. And Starman. I always went with Starman because he reminded me of the Road Warriors. He had the star painted on his face and stuff. And so anytime I played that game as a kid, I always pretended I was Hawk, right? And it's for a lot of the same things you said. Those guys were just so much bigger than life itself. I mean, just their physiques and their personas, and coming out with the spiked, shoulder pads, and once they got a little bigger, they couldn't use the Black Sabbath theme anymore. But yeah, they had that other theme, and that was still rocking. And you knew you were in for a treat when you heard that first line. Oh, what a rush! And then and these big old dudes are walking out with shoulder pads, and whoever was across the ring from them, you had a good feeling that the Road Warriors were going to walk away with the W on that match. But they had some good feuds throughout the years, for sure.
Absolutely. And if you ever get the chance, watch the Dark Side of the Ring about the Road Warriors. Man, that doc is insane. It's on
Oh,
Vice, but you can watch it on YouTube too. That's where I watched it. So
yeah, I love Dark Side of the Ring. And I don't know if it's true, but I had read somewhere online that Vice may be they may not be renewing the seasons. They may not be renewing. So hey, but I am really glad that they had a chance to scratch the surface with a lot of different stories, and the Road Warriors one was definitely one of my favorites of the series.
most definitely. And when you talked about like Kevin Sullivan, I remembered like the Dungeon of Doom and like introducing the Giant for the first time to face Hogan, and all that crazy wild stuff, and just like the whole like environment that they made. It was so unique, and like the fog and everything. It's just like, man, this is great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember, and I believe, I can't remember what year, but it was one of the Halloween Havocs where they had this wheel of doom, and they would spin the wheel, and whatever came up would be the match that they would have next, and I may be a little fuzzy on some of the details, some of the particulars, but I'll never forget the Dungeon of Doom when Kevin Sullivan had came into WCW. My dad and I were actually super excited to see him, because this is a Florida guy. Like, he was all in Florida, and we watched him on what would be considered the independent scene now. Back in those days, it was just a regular territory. But yeah, seeing Kevin Sullivan on TV, and seeing him lead a stable, and that guy on the microphone was just always a blast to hear talk. I mean, and he could flip things and to just get into opponents' heads. I mean, that psychological game. There's only a few wrestlers out there that really have or had at that moment, a real strong psychological game. Most guys would just come on and be like, my muscles are bigger than your muscles, and I'm going to beat you up. But Kevin Sullivan, and another one comes to mind, Jake the Snake. These guys just had a way with words, and they could just get that psychological game going. So by the time the match actually came, you were so excited to see whatever was going to happen. And I think we're starting to get back to some of that now with some of the newer wrestling that's been coming out. But yeah, the art of talking had went away for a little bit, it seemed, and now it's coming back. So it's good to see some of these psychological pieces and hearing folks talk about their matches and really just, selling the match. I mean, because back in the day, that's how some of these independent promoters would run. They would book these arenas, and they would trust that their stars or the stars that they booked would be able to sell those arenas out, and it depended on it. I mean, that was how these guys all got paid. How many butts can you put into the seats? And yeah, hearing some of those old interviews with Kevin Sullivan, especially, he knew how to get the audience right where he wanted them. So
most definitely. And when you spoke of the Road Warriors Iron Man theme, like it reminds me of myself because I have like a Ghostface killer mask, and he goes by Iron Man as well. And so, and the face paint, and I kind of like to like say, hey, I'm just like Road Warrior Hawk and Animal, and Kevin Sullivan too. Like, even though it was like the Dungeon of Doom to the Legion of Doom, you see what I did there? It's fantastic.
yeah, all these doom and gloom wrestlers, right?
Yep.
So, but yeah, the '80s were a tough time. So you could definitely pull some strings on the doom and gloom, and the end of the world, and we were at that place where is Russia gonna fire the nukes? Are we gonna fire the nukes? Who knows? And especially a lot of the foreign heels, Nikita Koloff, Ivan Koloff, the Sheik. I mean, just I remember when Sergeant Slaughter, so as a kid watching G.I. Joe, that's how I got introduced to Sergeant Slaughter. I know that he was around as a wrestler even before then, before that TV show was, a thing. And, even he had that gimmick back in the early 90s where he had aligned with the Sheik, and, they were trying to do some different things, to rile up the crowd. I mean, you'd never think Sergeant Slaughter, G.I. Joe, real American hero, Sergeant Slaughter is now all of a sudden siding with the enemies. So yeah, definitely, and that's really how, from in my opinion at least, that's really how a lot of wrestlers got that heat. I mean, and instantly anybody Hacksaw Jim Duggan went against, you'd always hear those chants, USA, USA. So, there's a lot of little bit of patriotism, but drawing on those evils of the world, per se. But I love the Sheik. Man, that guy is so hilarious, especially on his I believe it's on his Twitter account. He makes all these posts talking about, hey, you jabroni. So yeah.
Indeed, I love his Twitter, and his documentary is also on YouTube for free too. So if you want to watch that, that's good stuff. And yeah, like if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan telling everyone to like just taking their vitamins and saying their prayers, I don't think I would have gotten through COVID because I wasn't able to get vaccinated, so I was just able to like just take my vitamins, like my vitamins E's and zincs and everything like that, and say my prayers, and it worked. I got through it, and I didn't catch COVID once, so it's fantastic.
Yeah, especially being in Florida, man. I know the numbers went off the charts there for a little bit. I still got family in Florida, obviously, so I try to stay in touch with those folks as much as I can. Friends and stuff back home, and yeah, everything started going really crazy there for a minute. So I'm glad you stayed safe, my brother.
Absolutely, my brother. And it's like the wild thing was like it only lasted 4 months here. Like so like the masks were gone, or rarely any places required it. It was just like everything went back to normal after 4 months. I'm like, this is wild. And it was like all in like spend most of my time in Daytona anyways, and so it's like where the NWO was formed, and it was just like, oh, it's not too bad over here. I can go back to doing like stand up again. It's just take it slow and easy, and everything will be just fine.
Right on, man. Well, I'm glad to hear that you made it out through the other side, man.
Like, yeah,
And
dude.
it's interesting that you bring up Daytona and NWO because a couple years ago, we went back to rewatch, and I don't know if it's still for free on the WWE network or not. It's been a minute since I've checked out the network, but at the time, they had all these old WCW matches that you could just watch for free. So I went back and watched that Bash at the Beach, Hogan and Mach versus Hall and Nash, and I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming, but it still got me as a wrestling fan, seeing Hogan turn on Macho Man and see him in the middle of the ring, and Hogan kick back on the rope and drop that leg, and it was just, oh man, it was heartbreaking. I mean, you never, I mean, Hogan and Macho Man had that history, and I never would have expected it. Even though I knew the outcome and I knew what was coming up, it still got me as a wrestling fan. I mean, I love that transition, and I remember seeing it when it happened too. But when the fans started throwing the trash at him, and Hogan and Hall and Nash are getting pelted with garbage, and everybody's booing, and man, that was probably one of the greatest times to be a wrestling fan, was watching that, because it was kind of unspoken. When Hall and Nash first came over, they were, they weren't Razor, they weren't Diesel, but everybody knew who they were. And you thought to yourself, man, is WWF, WWE, is WWF, are they really invading WCW? Like, what is going on? And there was that mystery behind it. And, later on we found out that, it had nothing to do with WWF, but to see these guys come up and basically just destroy every single person. I think it was the Monday night Nitro right after Bash at the Beach, I believe. And I remember Hall and Nash were jumping. They jumped Eddie Guerrero. They jumped Rey Mysterio. They jumped a few dudes. And I remember I remember Nash picking up Rey Mysterio and just throwing him like a lawn dart into a tractor trailer that was parked outside of the taping. I think that's when they did the tapings in Orlando at Universal Studios, if I'm not mistaken. But man, seeing Ray get picked up, a very young Ray, by the way, but seeing him get picked up and just thrown into the trailer, I was like, oh my gosh, who can stop these guys? Nobody. Because so many people had invested in Hogan to do something about this invasion, right? Put a stop to this, man. And when him and Macho Man had teamed up, that's what we all thought was going to happen. The heroes were going to save the day. And at the end of the match, Hogan flips, and the rest is history.
It was heartbreaking for sure, and to see, calling back to Bret Hart, and he joined the NWO, and he's still the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be, in my opinion. And well, my all time favorite though is Sabu, but everyone else can give it up for Bret Hart. I mean, I love him too, but he's the excellence of execution. And when he joined the NWO, that was like heartbreaking too.
Yeah, I'll say that the Hitman's always been kind of one of my dudes, because he made me feel like, semi-normal looking people. I mean, Hitman was still shredded, but he made me feel like you didn't have to be, 7 foot tall. You didn't have to be 400 pounds. He kind of gave you a more realistic feel. And Bret Hart, his matches back in WWF days, like I remember his feud with Mr. Perfect. Wow. I remember his feud with Shawn. I mean, he just had so many great and wonderful matches. I mean, the company really was putting everything they had on Hitman, especially right after some of the steroid stuff started coming out. And it's funny too, because the very, very first WWF event that I went to in person was the Heart Attack tour. I believe it was '94. I don't have it pulled up or anything, but I think it was 1994. But the very same event, I got that's back in the day when WWF used to do one size fits all merch. So like if you wanted a t-shirt, it was gonna be a double XL. So I remember being a little kid and wearing this almost like dress because this shirt was so huge, and wearing that thing to school. But it was an Undertaker. It was just the glove, and it just said Undertaker on it, and it was just the picture of his hand, the glove. It looked so cool. I thought I was such a cool kid.
Indeed. Some of my favorite merch that I bought was like the Stone Cold Steve Austin F Fear Drink Beer shirt that I would wear around, and I was just a huge Stone Cold fan, and but I think it was an XL2, and like when I went to watch my very first pay per view live was WWE Vengeance in Denver when Kurt Angle fought Brock Lesnar and Big Show in a triple threat match, and they were on there with the Vendetta logo on the front, and like it was pretty dope. And I don't know where I put that shirt now. It's probably packed away somewhere or lost somewhere, but uh, and those just having those tees are just awesome. Now in all my closets nothing but like concert shirts from like my time as a concert journalist. So
Yeah,
soon to
absolutely. I mean, and just to give the fans out there that connection, that's actually how you and I met, is when you were doing music journalism, back in the day, I guess around 2013, 2014, maybe. So yeah, man, it's really awesome to see kind of everything kind of mishmash and come together for you. For me, it's like, man, look at my guy over here making all these moves, doing all these things. So I'm super proud of all the things that you're doing right now, man. And I know you're proud too. So, but it's cool to sit back and watch, like, man, that's my boy. Like, dang, he's taking pictures with all these guys. He's interviewing all these guys. This is awesome. So I appreciate you reaching out to me, man. I'm happy to be a part of this.
anytime, Joey. Yeah, that was like a wild time. I was reflecting on my life, like how like everything is like feels like a repel effect. Like I started at the very top for some reason, and I just repel down. Like whether it was like in my for my like my dreams of being like a Hollywood director, that happened, and then like starting off in concert journalism, and I started off like in the big leagues, and then I started repelling down to like Pueblo and like comedy, like it's just like the weirdest thing. Usually people start at ground level and work their way up, and I'm just like the opposite. And I don't know why. It just reminds me of like mankind being thrown off the Hell in a Cell, and Undertaker was on the other end. Like it's just bizarre.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes the only way to learn to swim is to start in the deep end, man. And yeah, I'd say you definitely went head first. So yeah, much love to you and all the things that you're doing right now. It's really cool to see.
Thank you, man. Are you still involved in the music and everything?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, not to detract from the topic of wrestling, but as I mentioned, being from Tampa, you have to love metal. I mean, it's just like a requirement. So yeah, me and my friends, Nick Pryor, David Grimm, we're all here in Colorado. We're all doing stuff. We're still playing music and such. So hey, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but we write the music that we want to hear. So if anybody else likes it, it's kind of just an additional bonus, right? We're playing it for ourselves. Maybe other people like it, maybe they don't. If they like it, cool. If they don't, cool. We already know we're not going to appeal to everyone, right? We're not writing commercial radio friendly music. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that way. And it's also, just to bring it back to wrestling, I mean, that's kind of how you parallel wrestling too. There's different promotions through the years. You had mentioned one of my favorite guys, Sabu. Back in the ECW days, when ECW came out, it wasn't for everyone. It wasn't for little kids. Little kids shouldn't be watching all this stuff. But I'm glad that I was mature enough, and my father felt that I was able to be able to consume some of that, because I saw your post the other day with RVD and Sandman, Sabu and Al Snow, and it just got me real, real sentimental for old ECW all of a sudden. And I was like, man, I remember ECW. Man, this is so rad. I'm so happy my boy gets to meet these guys. But yeah, Sandman and Sabu were like my dudes back in the day. You knew, and it's kind of the same as the Road Warriors. You knew when those guys were coming out, you knew you were about to see something go down. And man, Sabu, wow, homicidal, suicidal, genocidal. What a guy.
I'll never forget his match with Terry Funk, and like it was a barbed wire match, and he cut his bicep open. He said, "Give me the tape," and he wraps his arm, and then he still goes at him. Like, this is just legendary, and that's why he's my favorite all time. Like, I'll put him against anybody. He's just the scars proven on his body. It's like he's a man. Like the things that he would go through is just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, really, all the ECW guys from back in the day. I mean, I remember the Dudleys being back in ECW days, and really everybody. And I remember that moment that you were talking about. Sabu had to wrap his arm up, ripped his arm to shred. I mean, his arms, like his muscles popping out and stuff. And it kind of reminds me of the time, and I can't remember who Vader was fighting, but he was over in Japan, and his eyeball came out, and he had to pop his eyeball back and finish the match. And yeah, there's certain dudes that are just tough. And Sabu is definitely on the list of tough dudes I wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley with him being mad for sure.
Indeed. Do you remember when Vader was in Boy Meets World?
Yes! Oh my gosh! Yes! I can't remember who. He was like some dad character for somebody. I can't remember who he was, but yeah, I remember, man. And Vader was the man.
Oh man.
Vader was another one that when he came out, and I remember back in the day when he had that like mastodon elephant, I don't know what you want to call it, but it blew steam out of it, and he's walking to the branch. And I can't remember, I think he was wasn't he managed by Harley Race at that time too?
Something like that. I don't know. I know he was like billed for from wasn't he built from Denver too or something, or Colorado or something?
I'd have to Google that, my man. Unfortunately, while I do have a lot of wrestling facts up here, some of those neurons have been replaced with other facts and other things, and you learn some and some comes out, and yeah. So I'd have to Google that one, but I wouldn't doubt it, from the Rocky Mountains or whatever. I wouldn't doubt it. Vader was such a bad man, right? I mean, there were only a couple big guys that could even do those types of things, coming off the ropes and stuff like that. Another one that I really enjoyed was Bam Bigelow. And,
Oh yeah.
I know when you start talking about big men, the big man of wrestling, the bigger guys that are, they're not shredded, but they're still huge. He always comes up in the conversation too, So a lot of love for Bam Bigelow, a lot of love for Vader. They did things that you were kind of in awe of, like, man, this dude can do that. Like, especially when Bam would do those cartwheels. Man, that always threw me off. I was like, oh my gosh, he just did a cartwheel. So yeah.
I was looking it up, and we are both correct. He was managed by Harley Race, and he was from he was born in Linwood, California, but he passed away in Denver, Colorado, in his alma mater. Mater. I went to college, but I don't. It was University of Colorado, or CU, and he was built from Boulder, Colorado, the Rocky Mountains. So that's we were all correct on those ones. That's how you know that
Hey.
true wrestling fans, when you can just like say, "Hey, Raiders from it was hailed from the Rocky Mountains of Denver, Colorado," and Harley Race was his manager, and it's just like, oh man, this is some great stuff, dude.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
man, and when you mentioned Bam Bigelow, the first thing that comes to mind is his match with Taz, and how he got thrown into through the walkway. Do you remember that? I think
I
it was like
do.
you. I was like, man, this is wild.
And Taz, man, that was another dude that when I saw him first off, it was like, man, again, you don't have to be 7 foot, 400 pounds to be in wrestling. I mean, I figured out very early on that I just did not have the athletic ability, and just, I definitely am not, you know, my grandfather's height of 6'4". I'm just under 6 foot, and I'm definitely not 280. I'm more like 170. But there was always a part of me back in the back of my mind. When you're a kid and stuff, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a wrestler. I want to be on TV. I want to do that. I want to put people in these different maneuvers and submit them. And so when I think about dudes like Taz, when I think about dudes like Dean Malenko, another Florida guy, it kind of brought it to like, man, this is possible. Like, you don't have to be this super huge guy, But anyway, I didn't pursue it. I got other things going on in my life, so I never really followed that dream. But you think about dudes like DDP who didn't get into it until much later in their careers. And I know that you just had a pretty good chat about DDP and his relation with Buff, and his relation with some of the other wrestlers who needed that help. And man, that's so respectful. That's such an awesome mission that DDP has gone on. And man, it just makes me want to bang.
And don't forget your self high five too. Oh man, and you know what I was thinking? Like, you know how you wanted to be involved in wrestling but couldn't be a pro wrestler because of your size?
Yeah.
And you should marry your music with and make up wrestling theme songs, entrances with like for local wrestlers in the independent scene. And what if you did write like the new Iron Man for the new Road Warriors in town, and that'd be rad. And you could be a ref or a manager, like you said, and you could still be involved. Like, I mean, we watch AEW now, and everyone's from like different sizes. Whether you're like Jungle Boy or Luchasaurus, there's always everyone fits. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And I know we were chatting a little bit about that off camera here, but yeah, I would still love to be involved in wrestling if it was possible for me to have any avenue, And it's actually funny because my old band had a couple songs that were pretty good, and I had reached out to a couple wrestlers like, hey, if you ever need some music, like my band does stuff, here, check us out. But sometimes you got to have different connections and what have you, and plus knowing our music isn't for everyone and kind of thing. But regardless, yeah, I would absolutely love a chance to work in any kind of way, shape, or form with wrestling folks, whether it be as an announcer, hailing from the Rocky Mountain region of Colorado. I got to practice my announcement voice, and or if that's like a manager type role, or even just coming up with different moves. That was something that my dad and I mean, I remember being a youngster and trying to come up with different holds and different locks, and I mean, they kind of all been done at this point, right? I mean, especially when you think about a wrestler like Dean Malenko, the man of 1,000 holds. Like, how many more holds can you actually invent? A lot of the holds that people use have been in use or used by some other wrestler at some point, some period in time. So really just trying to think about like what would be a new maneuver, what would be a new hold, or and sometimes I just draw blanks because it's like, man, the greatest wrestlers have already done these things. It's kind of cool to me to see some of these old maneuvers come back kind of full circle. Like, for example, growing up as a kid, Jake the Snake was, even though he was a bad guy, I still loved him because he had the snake. He had Damien, and he put Damien on top of people after he won the match, and it was creepy, and snakes. and his finisher being the DDT. And now you fast forward 30 years, and even though it's a variation of the DDT, now you got John Moxley with his paradigm shift. It's a modified DDT. So, you think about some of these old moves, you think about what wrestlers were doing back then, and you see it come, and you see it come, and here it comes back again. And I mean, I'll tell you what really has impressed me the most with a lot of the current wrestling that's coming out right now is just a lot of the maneuvers that are being done. A lot of the one of my favorite guys to watch is Ray Phoenix, and it's because of how athletic he is. I mean, he makes everything just look so super smooth. And when you think about him, you can't help but think about dudes like Sabu. You can't help but think about dudes like Rey Mysterio. You can't help but think about, Too Cold Scorpio. I mean, I think Too Cold was, I think, the first wrestler that I ever see do, I think, a 540 splash off the top rope, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was his finisher at the time. But yeah, you see these kind of pioneers of the wrestling, and you see how they've impacted wrestling, and now you see these younger guys, and they're doing the same things, and I mean, and they're trying to one up, right? Yeah, it's not a normal DDT that Moxley does. He does something a little different, but at the end of the day, it's still a DDT. But they're trying to one up, they're trying to make it like more devastating,
Absolutely. And when you were talking about trying to come up with new holes and stuff, it's like, and Dean Malenko and the Man with 1,000 Holes, it reminds me of the new guy that, or the one that I see on TV now that he's returned from injury, that reminds me of him so much as Angelico. And the way that he does his submissions is just incredible. And I'm like, I wish, like, his old tag team partner was still signed with AEW, and they had the same theme music, and the way that he danced on the way to the ring and everything like that. It's just like, man, now it's like, ever since he got into a new faction, it's just like, ugh, it's just not the same.
Yeah, I'll say, and this is perfect segue, man. I'm so glad you mentioned Angelico, because therefore a little bit, and that this is one thing I'll say about being a wrestling fan. You have to watch it. You have to watch it weekly. You have to be able to keep up on the storylines. And there was a period of time, maybe back in like 2014, 2015, I just didn't have the time to devote to it, so I wasn't really watching it in the same capacity as what I used to. And what got me back into wrestling and really embracing wrestling as a fan was there was a promotion out of Great Britain called WCPW. What culture, or WCP? Yeah, What Culture Pro Wrestling, and it was ran by the dudes from kind of like a review site, and they're still active. I mean, the review site What Culture is still active. They still do video game reviews and wrestling reviews and all this and that. But the original guys that did it, they're no longer there. They have their own thing called Cultaholic. And if you want to catch up on wrestling, if you don't want to watch the full show and you still want to be informed, I would say go check out What Culture or Cultaholic. I'm more of a fan of the Cultaholic dudes. It's kind of like back in the day when you had WCW and WWF. Like, they're different, but they're similar. So if you like people talking about wrestling, if you want to hear some British accent talking about wrestling, right? Because accents make things fun. But yeah, check out What Culture or check out Cultaholic. But WCPW, when those guys first put that wrestling promotion out, and I had started watching their weekly little reviews on Raw and on SmackDown, because I didn't have cable at the time, so it was a little hard for me to try to watch matches and stuff. But the way that they reviewed things, it just hooked me as a fan. It got me back into it. And then once they started doing their shows, and they had Angelico on there. They had Cody Rhodes on there back in the day when he went independent for a little while. Then they had dudes I had never heard of, like Joe Hendry. I was like, whoa, who's that? And then they had Joe Coffey, who actually ended up being on NXT UK. They had Big Damo, aka Killian Dane, who we all know is part of the faction Insanity. So watching those guys at the very beginning, and I know that they had careers before WCPW, but watching those guys in WCPW, watching their events, I think I watched the first 60 episodes that they put on, and then they became Defiant, and now, whatever deal with WWF they have and NXT UK that they have is what it is. But man, those first matches, and dudes like Martin Kirby, man, the heel, he was somebody that everybody loved to hate, and then he flipped face, and people started getting behind him. And a little bit after that, I kind of stopped watching it because of that split, right? The factional split between the OG What Culture dudes and the new What Culture dudes, and I followed the old ones, so. But yeah, maybe one of them sees it. Big shout to Adam. But
Absolutely, I love watching them like on YouTube, and like I watch Wrestle Talk, and they just appear out of nowhere on my YouTube, and I'm like, all right, I'll just click it, and it's just like it's just that their titles are just so catchy that you just can't um, not watch them, and so man, it's just and back in the day, like 2008, I reached out to TNA to be like a broadcast intern, and they never replied, and you saw that post, and so now that it's coming back full circle, I can do like wrestling broadcasting, but in a different way, where I just interview fans and wrestlers and everything like that. So now I'm independent, and I kind of prefer to be independent, because like you don't want to have like a boss like that, like, well, like, no offense to TNA or Impact or anything like that. I meant like, I just want something like breathing down and like going. You got to change this line and change that line. I mean, that's what WWE does. Like, they got to remember like new lines like 5 minutes before they go on air or do their segment. It's like, good gravy. I can't imagine that.
yeah, and I think about dudes that have found great success with being, just exactly what you're talking about. Being kind of that just observant person rather than being affiliated with a certain promotion and whatever. And I may catch heat for this, but I think about like Dave Meltzer and how he's been able to kind of ride that line, and he hasn't necessarily been one or the other, but he's definitely somebody who puts a spotlight where it needs to be shown. I mean, I think about, and it was funny because I was talking to one of my friends the other day about the matches with Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho just a few years ago. It wasn't that long ago that Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho were facing each other in the Tokyo Dome, and what led up to that, right? And just how Meltzer was able to, put his spin on things, and reading his journalism. And man, I'll just say, the world of wrestling is as big as you want it to be. So I have a lot of love for what you're doing, man. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in everything that you do.
Thank you, man. You too. I'm so glad you're still doing music and everything like that. And yeah, like trying to be here and trying to keep the music scene alive in Colorado while in Florida is just, I don't know, it's pretty neat that people look forward to my festival every year. And for some bands, it's their only time that they perform. It's just like some people just like, I remember one year, one band, one like members lived out of like when some lived in Kansas and some lived in New Mexico, and they all said, "All right, we're coming. We're still coming back. And we're coming just to do this, and then we're gonna break up again." It's like this is so cool.
Yeah, I'll say the Seraph Fest has been something of legend for Colorado, at least in my area and the people that I run with, and luckily my old band was able to be part of one of those fests. And yeah, you always have such great people on there too. So I'm awesome, very excited to see that it comes back every year, man. So kudos to you for getting everything, keeping it rolling, right?
Heck yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it reminds me of the old wrestling video game WrestleFest. It's like the same thing, you know? It's like getting all your favorites, local bands in Colorado. I mean, we have a lack of stand up comedians in Pueblo, so that's the only people that I can like outsource to Denver and Colorado Springs. But for everything else, I try to keep it as local as Pueblo as possible. Because, like, we don't have, like, places to play that much anymore, and they don't get to share the stage with their buddies all at the same time anymore. And so if I can just like bring them all together for like, and plus I really don't want to waste gas because gas is expensive, and I don't my birthday is in December, so it's always snows in December. So I moved to my Christmas in July, my birthday in July. I'm like, let's just all meet up together at the grindhouse, and just like party for 4 days. So
Yeah, yeah, 100%, man. And
like this.
it's been a minute since I mean, geesh, I think the last time one of my music projects played in Pueblo, I think it was like 2018. So it's been a while. But and I'll just say like a lot of the scene kind of didn't know what to do when Phil's shut down originally, and I know that they got new ownership and they're trying to do new things now, but when the old Phil's had shut down, it was just devastating. There's been so many great memories there, playing with a lot of different musicians, meeting a lot of great people, including you, and just being able to have that place to play, have that place that was accepting, and it didn't matter if you were gonna get on the microphone and talk about all your wonderful experiences, or if you were gonna jump behind a guitar and slam out some music and whatever. So yeah, I love the fact that you're still able to keep that rolling through, man. That's awesome.
Indeed, and going back to like shirts and merch and how yours was like one size fits all with the Undertaker hand and mine with the Stone Cold shirt. Like everyone always looks forward to the shirts, and like Barrett Skull, thank God for him. Like, and my buddy Charlie McMullen for drawing all the artwork. It's like I try to keep everything like local, and like so lately we've like for the past 5 years or so we've had like the Hellraiser Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas theme because like Clive is my favorite writer, and so is Hunter S. Thompson. And so I have my history with Clive, and like I invented a style of journalism that's inspired by Hunter, and we just like married the two, and it's like just rad, and I can't wait to release like this design, and like everyone like I've seen those shirts like from here to Thailand, like people are just wearing them. It's just nuts. So it's awesome,
Oh
and
heck
like
yeah.
to have like all the bands and all the comics on the back repped around the world is just the best feeling in the world for me. Like that's all I want.
Yeah, right on. Well, I'm happy to see it come back every year, man. So yeah, I hope you have the ability to keep it going. And I know that we were talking a little bit before the cast about um, like, and I don't know if we want to jump into business here. I'm not here to push some stakes or some attorney or whatever. But I know that we came together on this podcast and we wanted to attribute it to the Seraph Fest. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to mention anything about it here, but um, so anybody that wants to throw some money, please throw it that way. Keep the traditional festival alive, and yeah, I, fortunate enough to be on one of them, but always a fan when they come through. So
Indeed, I'll just probably put a tip jar or something and give it to like use that to buy merch from everybody else because that's what I usually do. Is like I take my merch sales and I buy merch from all the other bands and I give their merch for free. So it's like our home distribution center, like on the spot. It's like we have trivia and stuff like that, and so hopefully one year I'll bring you guys back because I'm like I always like my booking process is like book everybody that was on there the year prior, and then try and fill in the rest of the dates and work on if there's like a new band, and then I can just every if there's a new band that's in Pueblo, I'll throw them on, and then I'll bring in like the out of towners, and that's like my format. And so sometimes all the slots get full, and by the time I try to get everybody else on there, I'm like, And like we did our fest last year in July, and it was like hot as all get out, and I'm like, I am not gonna do this anymore. We're just gonna have like, like two opening acts, a direct support, and a headliner, like for like all dates. And so we are not gonna get burned on the sun like this ever again. It's the absolute worst. Pueblo's sun is like the worst like ever.
Well, and then I'll say something too, because growing up in Florida and stuff, like I'm used to a hot summer. Since I moved to Colorado back in 2004, 2005, it's a different type of heat. But man, when you go down to Pueblo, and it's like, man, who turned on the humidity here? Because holy smokes, I haven't felt like this. Like, I am just literally standing here sweating. It's so freaking hot. Like, what do I have to do to not be hot? This is crazy. I haven't felt this way since I was in Florida. So, yeah, man, Pueblo weather is definitely a unique entity of its own. So, but yeah. No, I don't know if there are any other topics or things you wanted to talk about with wrestling. But like I said, you just point me in the direction, and my mouth will just burr, 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 keep on going. So
Absolutely, it feels like an Inferno match in Pueblo, like every summer. So it's like,
that's awesome.
had to bring it back to wrestling. But you have a special giveaway that you wanted to do, right?
Yeah. So it's I just started a new page, right? I mean, and I don't know what kept me from doing it in the past. But I just started a new Facebook page. It's a public page, so anybody can join up. It's called Joey Loves Wrestling. Joey, that's me, and I love wrestling. But what we're going to do is the link to this interview is actually on my page right now. So for whoever tags, and I'll put some instructions in the post too, but for whoever tags this interview, and I want to see 3 people tagged, right? 1, 2, 3. Now you're the champion. But I picked up this wonderful box set here, this Championship Showdown WWE box set, and it's got 2. And part of the reason I bought this is because it does have, like, these are it's 2 of my favorite dudes. We got the Undertaker over here. We got Bret Hitman Hart over here. And it's funny too, because we had talked about wrestling video games, and I can't remember the name of the actual game, but back in the NES days, they had a WWF game, and I think they had like 8 characters total. I don't remember. But when my dad and I would play this game, we would always pick Bret Hart and the Undertaker. He was always the Undertaker, and I was always Bret Hart. And we called him the Hit of Death, right? So here you can see Undertaker and Bret Hart. But anyways, when we were playing this Nintendo game, we would always pick these 2 dudes, and we had our own tag team name, the Hit of Death. And man, it'd have been cool. I'm glad that Undertaker ended up teaming up with Kane, Brothers of Destruction. But man, I would have loved to see Bret Hart and Undertaker team up and actually be a tag team, tag team group. So, man, but yeah, we had the name picked out. We had everything. We had our own. We had our tape player, like our cassette player, and we would hit play. And that was back when, let's see, Dehumanizer. So going back to Black Sabbath, Dehumanizer had just came out. And we would throw on that tape and hit play and have our dudes come out. We would mute the volume on the TV and have our dudes come out. And yeah, it was super cool, man. So for anybody who goes to the interview, goes to my page and just tag 3 people in there. And this could be yours. I'll be picking somebody at random. I'm going to give this contest until the end of the month. The idea is to try to grow the page, grow some awareness to the page, and it's nothing serious. I like to have fun. There's no rhyme or reason for what I post when I post it. It's just really just me being a fan and trying to share some of those memories. And I know we talked about some of those things on this cast today, but yeah, come give it a like, come tag some people. three people, and yeah, there we go. Tag three people, and we'll be picking somebody at random to get this out too. So
like a trios match.
yeah.
Yeah, like your shirt. We were talking about merch. What do you have on your shirt there?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, right now I got my old Brody Lee shirt here. I'm super into the Dark Order. You know, we had talked about different factions, and we had talked about you know, I always kind of like the darker side of things. And you know, when the Dark Order first, I mean, and they're turning face now, but when the Dark Order had first came out, and they were just, you know, the chosen one, or you know, and then Brody came out, I had to get this shirt, man. It is such a rad shirt, and you know, rest in power, Brody Lee, and you know, I don't know what else there is to say about it. It really sucks to see him have such a short time in AEW, and but you know, he made a mark. He made a mark anywhere he went, and I had to represent today. So here we go.
Indeed, absolutely. Rest in power, Brody Lee for sure. It's and I love watching the Dark Order and all that stuff, and when they were with Hangman Page for a little while, and I don't know what happened there, but there's a lot of factions in AEW, that's for sure. So
Yeah, they should call it faction wrestling.
yep, FEW for few. No, I'm kidding. I'm enjoying their programming for sure. Like my buddy and I always get together for their pay per views because I'm so glad that they're like quarterly and we can just like instead of every month, so that storyline can build and build and build and just like and see the surprise whoever is going to be like the next signee show up and like surprise us. We look forward to that the most.
Yeah, we get a little lucky this next couple months. We got one in May and one in June. Um, what is it? Double or Nothing, I think, is coming up, and then the Forbidden Door with their partnership with New Japan. I cannot wait for some of those matches. Oh
Hmm.
my goodness!
It's gonna be some fun times for sure. And so, like at our open mic in Daytona, where the NWO was formed, when Buff Bagwell, I got to interview him there. We honor DX off the top, like with Are You Ready? And like the whole crowd goes nuts. And like I'm surprised no one brings signs or anything. And then like I'm the DJ, so everyone picks their own music that they love walking up to. And from like Linda Ronstadt to like DMX to like so it's like you said with the wrestling music, like you don't know where you fit in, but and just like stand up is like comedy is subjective, and like everyone's different. Everyone has their own personality, like and it's like I'm the dirtiest comic there is there, like without cursing, and like that's my shtick. And then some people talk about drugs, and some talk about sex, some talk about rock and roll, and so like you can do anything you ever want with with if you ever decide to go into the music part of the wrestling. Like I mean, Sandman walked out to Enter Sandman, and like Rob Van Dam walked out to Pantera, and like CM Punk walks out to Living Color. Like you can do absolutely anything. And even Jungle Boy has his music from like the 80s. It's like it doesn't matter, like create that music, and get your music out there that way. Like when if they love it. They're gonna sing along like it's Judas from Fozzy. Like you know what I mean? If you can like, and that's like one of my favorite parts. As like I have this song I do Puddle of Mud's parody of like She Hates Me, right? Like my alter ego does, and like everyone knows the words so much that and they keep on requesting it that they finish my lyrics. And I feel like Axl Rose up there, or like I feel like Chris Jericho up there. It's like this is like the most amazing feeling in the world. Like they know my jokes and they know the song and they sing along and they finish my lyrics. It's just like the best feeling in the world. So go for it. Like don't let nothing stop you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And, you know, maybe some of it's just being a little lazy, you know, got other things happening. But yeah, I mean, I'll say you're not wrong. It's definitely something that I should definitely put some more effort into. And you never know, like you said. I mean, a lot of the music that's put out, like you never have known who some of these bands were, and now all of a sudden you got somebody. I mean, I'll say, I mean, I was familiar with Fozzy. But Judas, man, what a song! I sing that in the shower. I brush my teeth to it. But yeah, man, that song is just instant classic now that Chris comes out to it. Everybody knows the words. I mean, there was a time where I was listening to it like every minute of the day, like 2 weeks straight. And, people in my household weren't necessarily happy with that. But hey, it is what it is. I'm going to listen to Judas. I want to sing these lyrics, man. And,
Absolutely.
it gets you hyped up for that match too. I mean, especially you hear such a song and you connect with the lyrics in some way, shape, or form, or even just the music itself with how dark and harrowing it can be. I mean, you think about some of the other music that had came out through the years with like Kane, for example. I mean, no words until the end. But that first and it's just like and the lighting and you just get so hyped up like, man, here comes Cade, oh my gosh, he's gonna wreck somebody. But
Indeed.
the music can definitely set the mood, and yeah, you're right, it is something I should go after a little harder than I have in the past. So who knows, maybe you'll hear one of my songs on TV one day.
Absolutely, dude. It's gonna happen. So it's kind of like the Undertaker too with his bell tolls. It's like it's gonna be another the Undertaker. The lights are gonna go off and stuff like that. And there was some like wrestling. You mentioned like WWF and NES games. There was like WWF WrestleMania was one of them. The Steel Cage Challenge was another. King of the Ring was another. And let's see. And WrestleMania Challenge was the other.
I think it was the steel cage, because I remember that was like the big part of the game was that you could do the cage match, and it was so like the graphics were so like just horrible because we're talking 30 years ago. But you see the little dude like he's trying to climb up to the top, and then he finally gets to the top, and then you gotta back down. And yeah, I had so much fun playing that game, and then fast forwarding, what was it? SmackDown versus Raw back on PlayStation 2, I believe. Um, my buddy started making all these wrestlers, and then he brought over. That was back in the day when you could bring the memory card over and you stick it in, and then download all the stuff, and then put it on your memory card. So he came over, and there weren't wrestlers that were created for some of the dudes that he put like Canyon on there. Um, I'd have to really try to remember how many other dudes he put on there, but he this was back before, and now it's so easy. People have the wrestlers already built out. Like you just log into, whether you're playing PlayStation or Xbox, you just log into the game and you can do the community creations and bring them in. It's like my boy was making the community creations before the community creations were even a thing. So it was super cool back in those days, man. I really loved playing that game. And yeah, I'm very grateful that we're at this point in time where we have machines that are capable of running these games with such high definition graphics. And, I know people will have different thoughts on gameplay right now, but I really can't wait for the AEW game to come out. It's supposed to be out later this year, so we'll see.
Yep. Who better than Canyon, right?
Ah, yeah, Canyon.
Oh man, and I haven't played video games like had a home console since the PlayStation 2. Like ever since they started doing downloadable content and you had to pay for extra stuff, I'm like, oh, forget about it. I'm just gonna reminisce about my Def Jam Vendetta days and my Fight for New York days. And my
Oh,
and when I got to create like Neo and they had the for SmackDown the video games and you can just like cause that effect that like the Matrix effect, and so that's the only reason why I created my own Neo from the Matrix. It's just like doing like like a flying head, but like Chris Benoit does, and then like freezing it and like making the cameras rotate around him. And I know Chris Benoit has that checkered past, but he brought a lot to the ring. So
yeah, I was really trying to think about wrestlers that I really, really enjoyed through the years. And, yeah, what he did super sucks. And I don't want what he did to, go unnoticed because, I mean, he did it, he did what he did. And, you know, it it extremely sucks because I was a super huge Chris Benoit fan when he was, the crippler, the Canadian crippler. And he had his time in the Four Horsemen. And I just, Chris has been, he was a dude that I had followed for a long time. So when that news broke, when that all happened, man, it just sent shockwaves up and down my spine. Like my hair on my arm was on end hearing that news report. Like, are you serious right now? And then there was so many people who went into the conspiracy theories, and we had talked about Kevin Sullivan before. His name had came up, and it was just such a horrible situation all around. And it really breaks my heart even just talking about it right now. It just like re-breaks my heart every time I think about it because, man, I mean, could you imagine if he had made it to see AEW going on? And even furthermore, Eddie Guerrero, if either one of these dudes had made it to see AEW happen, I couldn't imagine, especially with Dean there, with DDP there. I mean, Jake's there. I couldn't imagine that these dudes wouldn't have had some hand in something, especially when you see guys like Tully on there. Like, I know FTR just ditched him as the manager, and maybe we'll see Bret Hart soon too. But, when you see these guys from your past and you watch these matches with them in it, and now you see them and they're doing things, especially like with Regal coming back, man, you talk about a mind blower. When they announced Regal, I was just like, oh, here we go. Regal, yes. And I know they got him in like a manager capacity right now, but you know that there's going to be some good things coming down the line. I cannot wait to see kind of some of these storylines blossom off and become something. So, yeah, it is a good time to be a wrestling fan, especially when you start looking at some of these more independent scenes, when you start looking at the support that local entertainment is getting. And I'll just say, I don't know how much time we have, but shout out to CSW, Colorado Springs Wrestling. There's a dude on there right now who I cannot believe has not been approached yet. Hunter Gray. He comes out, he's like this barbarian looking guy. He used to, I don't think he does anymore, but he used to come out with this giant axe. And one of the first matches that I saw him, it just blew my mind. He was standing on the apron and he did a moonsault from the apron to outside the ring. And he's a big guy. So to see some dude like that pull off an athletic maneuver like that, it blew my mind. And shout out to Hunter Gray. And if you want to know more, you should definitely check him out. He's been making waves all throughout the Midwest over here. I've seen him I've seen him announced for shows down in like Texas and stuff. So yeah, he's definitely trying to make his mark, and I hope he does, man. He's really a good wrestler, and he brings a certain persona to an independent scene like Colorado Springs. So,
and when I saw FTR fight each other and they pay homage to the Hart Foundation, that was so dope with the, like, move after move. And then you brought me to what the next segment is, and which 5 wrestlers, whether they're independent or pro wrestling level, would you like to see on an episode of ROW?
That's a good question, and I was hoping that you were going to ask me that. Knowing that you're in Florida, I would say if there's any way, shape, or form you could sit down with Kevin Sullivan, he would be somebody that I would love to see. And I know he's done a bunch of interviews in the past, but I would really love to see you and Kev sit down and talk shop about, all the amazing matches and his history throughout Florida. I mean, I just think that would be so dope. And then as a second person, and the higher you get up the chain, the harder it's going to be to get these dudes, right? So, I mean, that's just is what it is. But as one journalist to another journalist, I would like to see you have CVV on here, Chris Van Vliet. I really enjoy his interviews. I really enjoy and he's got that kind of connection because he used to be in TV and work, a news station up in Canada and all this, and he's done some stuff for I think he's done some stuff for Entertainment Tonight or whatever. But he would be a really good person just to be able to sit down and talk some shop with. And then I would really love, and I know that it came up previously, I would really love to see you be able to sit down with Sabu. Just as a old hardcore wrestling fan, I personally love Sabu as well. So, however other people feel about him, but he's got some stories to tell. And, I don't know what it would be to book him on here, but man, to sit down with Sabu and just have that time and be able to speak with him, and get his thoughts on certain things, I think that would be super awesome. As a fourth person, I would say if there was a way that you could potentially sit down with, some of our new upcomer dudes, I would really like to hear an interview with Wheeler Yuta. Maybe people don't know who he is. Maybe you have heard of him. But yeah, he's the newest addition to the Blackpool Combat Club, AEW. Of course, with William Regal at the helm. Let's see, you got Jon Moxley in there. You got Bryan Danielson. I always want to call him Daniel Bryan, but you got Bryan Danielson in there. And yeah, I think when you have a younger talent like Wheeler Yuta, who's up and coming, it's kind of one of those hard to deny moments, and he just needs a little more exposure, I think. And then finally, as a final interview, and this is shooting for the moon, right? I'd love you to be able to sit down with Stone Cold Steve Austin, man.
That'd be awesome.
Just knowing how much of a fan you are of him, and personally, I am a huge fan of Stone Cold as well. I used to have the 316 shirt back in the day. Had a 316 shirt on in the airport, Tampa International Airport, and people come up like, Steve Austin shirt. Oh, that's cool. But yeah, man, I mean, if you want to talk about shooting for the moon, Stone Cold, I think, I mean, he has so many stories from so many different periods of his life, so many different promotions that he's wrestled for. I mean, I know he does his own podcast. I know he's done a lot of interviews in his time. But just to be able to sit down with him and blow the air back and forth, I think that would be really awesome. I think Stone Cold, just knowing that how much of a fan you are of his, and I think a lot of people would love to see you get down and dirty in the details with him.
Absolutely, I would love that too. And so we're gonna do a lights out match, and your cue with the ROW. And without further ado,
R-O-Dub, 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 R-O